Good morning. My name is Tedman Wong, Hearing Officer for San Francisco Public Works. Maribel Hansen is the clerk for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterward through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website, sfpublicworks.org. As this is a virtual hearing, there's no sign-in sheet, so if you'd like to receive information about the results of this hearing, please send an email to the email address listed on the hearing notice. This public hearing is being held to consider one item, Order number 208181, to consider approving certain exceptions to the Treasure Island Yerba Buena Island Subdivision Code and the Treasure Island Yerba Buena Island Subdivision Regulations to authorize issuance of notices of completion and for the offer of improvements for acceptance and public dedication notwithstanding the deferral of completion of certain improvements within subphases 1YA and 1YB as permitted by San Francisco Public Works through street improvement permit number 18IE-0330. My job as hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the director. The director will make the final determinations. When the director's determinations are made, the department will notify you of them if you have provided contact information. The hearing will proceed as follows for today's case. I will ask Public Works staff to speak first and present the case. Then I will allow the applicant to speak. Then I will allow any member of the public to speak. Then if the department would like to address any previous comments, I will allow them to speak. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers and will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds left. If you are a party to this proceeding, I will call on you to speak. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let me know before you speak. You will then have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. If you are a member of the public or a witness who wants to speak, wait for me to call for public comments. Then if you have joined on a computer, use Zoom's raise your hand feature to put yourself in the queue to speak. If you have joined us on a telephone, press *9 to indicate you are raising your hand. When it is your turn to speak, I will recognize you. If you are on a computer, unmute yourself before you speak. If you are on a telephone, press *6 to unmute yourself before you speak. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let me know before you speak. You will then have a standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. Comments and questions should be addressed to me and not to the applicant or the department. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of this hearing. If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. We will now begin the hearing. We will start with any general public comments. This is for members of the public to address the hearing officer on matters that are within the department's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. Maribel, do you see any hands? You're muted, Maribel.
Apologies. No, there are no hands to requesting to speak.
Okay. There are no comments for this item. I will close this item. We will now move on to hearing order number 208181 to consider approving certain exceptions to the Treasure Island Yerba Buena Island Subdivision Code and the Treasure Island Yerba Buena Island Subdivision Regulations to authorize issuance of notices of completion and for the offer of improvements for acceptance and public dedication notwithstanding the deferral of completion of certain improvements within subphases 1YA and 1YB as permitted by San Francisco Public Works through street improvement permit number 18IE-0330. May I have Public Works make its presentation?
All right. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right.
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Denny Fan. I'm a project manager with the Infrastructure Task Force, and I'll be presenting this item for the Treasure Island Yerba Buena Island project. And this is in regard to a developer's request to defer completion of certain public improvements until sometime after formal street acceptance by the Board of Supervisors. Just for some context, this project is a major joint development agreement project that will produce up to 8,000 new housing units on the island, new parks and open spaces, a ferry terminal, an expanded marina, hotels, restaurants, retail, entertainment, and public art over the next decade or so. And Public Works is responsible for managing the subdivision mapping, design coordination, permitting, construction inspection, and acceptance of the overall public infrastructure improvements on behalf of all city agencies. Phase 1 of the project is currently under construction, which includes Yerba Buena Island as a whole and the southeast corner of Treasure Island as shown on this map. As part of the project's public improvement agreement, the developer is required to first build out the horizontal public improvements in order to develop and support the adjacent vertical building parcels. These public improvements generally include new sewer, water, and electrical lines, roadways, streetlights, and pedestrian and bike facilities, and other critical infrastructure such as water tanks and pump stations. In 2018, Public Works issued a street improvement permit for Yerba Buena Island, which is shown as subphases 1YA and 1YB on this map. And the developer recently substantially completed that required infrastructure and is ready to offer the new streets and infrastructure to the city for formal acceptance by the Board of Supervisors. Public Works will be issuing a formal notice of completion for the work so that they can open the streets and complete the adjacent vertical housing projects, as well as open the newly completed public parks on Yerba Buena Island that rely on that public infrastructure. However, there are a few non-critical improvements that the developer is requesting to defer and complete at some time after the notice of completion and after formal street acceptance by the Board of Supervisors. And in general, that includes concrete collars around 2 electrical vaults, roadway striping by SFMTA, final power connections by SFPUC, minor repairs to some driveways and curb ramps that have already been built, a water meter and bypass, and final streetscape improvements on both Treasure Island Road and McCalla Road. And in general, these improvements are being deferred because of either 1, the work cannot be completed now until the adjacent vertical building project is completed, or 2, the improvements such as repairs to driveways or final streetscape improvements could be damaged again by the ongoing construction in the area. Or 3, the work needs to be scheduled and completed by city crews, such as roadway striping or installation of a water meter, and our schedule is out of the developer's hands. Per section 1712 of the subdivision code, the director can authorize such deferrals to any of the requirements in the subdivision code of regulations, as long as they are not in violation of the Subdivision Map Act, and the director finds that these 3 conditions apply. The first is that applying certain codes would create practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships to the project. And 2, the deferrals will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to the other properties. And 3, the deferrals are not contrary to the project documents or city regulations. Public Works has consulted with the impacted city agencies, including the City Attorney's Office, TIDA, SFPUC, and SFMTA. And we recommend that the director grant the 6th exception request to defer the completion of certain improvements until sometime after the formal acceptance by the Board of Supervisors, as well as authorize the issuance of notices of completion and accept offers of improvements. We came up with a few conditions in our consultation with the departments, including that the director will withhold adequate security equivalent to 100% of the cost of deferred improvements until the work is deemed complete. And the developer will coordinate with SFMTA for any interim striping and ensure that all payments of any outstanding invoices required to reimburse city crews are paid for exception number 2, as well as coordinate with SFPUC to complete water meter and bypass work on Northgate Road before acceptance for exception number 6. For exception number 1, our condition is that the developer will construct the concrete collars monolithically around the vaults, maintain a temporary fencing around the vault to ensure ADA compliance, and only offer the vaults and the collars to the city for acceptance once the adjacent vertical site is raised to grade and proper land rights are provided to SFPUC. And lastly, for exception number 4, our condition is that the developer will defer all improvements on TI Road and make the final one-way configuration on McCalla Road through a deferred SIP in the future, and will offer them for NOC and acceptance with that deferred SIP. They will also submit a post-paving CCTV of the pipes on TI Road to show that the pipe was not damaged or has settled during final construction, as well as submitting as-built showing the completed work to date with the current SIP. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Denny. Two quick questions. What is an SIP?
The SIP is a street improvement permit. So it's the Public Works permit to allow contractor to start construction.
Oh, thank you. And second question, if the exceptions are approved, how will the deferred items be tracked to ensure that they are completed? I saw that there would be funds withheld until they're done, so they won't be paid for it. But as far as if the work continues with other parts of the project, how will we keep track of these items that are deferred to make sure that they are done?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a public improvement agreement with the developer, which is basically a contract between the city staff and the developer that all these improvements will be completed. And so since we're deferring these particular improvements, that means the public improvement agreement is still open. So we are still tracking it through that contract. And city staff is going to be working with them on the next phase of the project, over the next decade or so. So we're going to be there with them, ensuring that the work is completed as requested.
So it kind of gets transferred over like onto a list.
That's correct. And they have to submit a separate street improvement permit application that will include all of this deferred work. So
okay.
we'll be tracking it that way.
Okay, thank you. Do you know if any representative from the developer would like to speak today?
I don't believe anyone from the developer is here today.
Okay. And at this time, we'll open up to any members of the public who wish to speak.
At this time, there are no hands raised from attendees.
Thank you, Maribel. If there are no more comments for this item, I will now close the item and will make my recommendations to the director. Order number 208181 is now closed.
Thank you.
We have reached the end of today's agenda. Are there any additional public comments on any of the items from today's agenda? If you have spoken, you will not be allowed to speak again. This is for those who might have come late or who didn't have a chance to speak. I don't think there's been any change in attendees. If there
No.
are, thank you. If there are no more public comments, I will close this hearing. This hearing is now closed.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and conclude the recording, Tedman, if that's okay with you.
Yes.